How can you split a string into multiple rows? Hello, I'm Philip Burton of idodata.com. You can see on screen that I have declared a variable which has got 5 different cities in Florida. Now they are all contained in the one row. Now what I want is to have each of them split into different rows. So Jacksonville on one row, Tampa in another, and so forth. Now we can do this in SQL Server 2016 and onwards using string_split. So it's fairly straightforward. There are 2 arguments that you need. The first one is the string you want split, and the second is how you want to split it. So this is your delimiter or separator. Now I should point out SSMS does not like string_split. You can see that it's got this squiggly red underline, and if I look over it, it says an insufficient number of arguments were supplied. That's not actually true. So you'll have to just ignore the squiggly underlines. So we have got this in one particular row. If I now run this, now notice first of all that this is in the from section. So this isn't a function that you would put in here in the select clause, it's in the from clause. So I'm going to say select everything from this. So if I execute it, here you can see the result. It has split this string into 5 different rows. Now notice that the column's name is value. So if you want to change that, then you'd have to use an alias. So select value as the results, for instance. So if I run that, then we now have my result being shown as a column called the result. But initially, it will be called value. So let's take another example. So we've got here something really long. For true table addicts, end of sentence. An extremely durable bike, end of sentence. It will go everywhere. It will keep you on control. It will not break your budget. So we've got about 5 sentences there. And what I want to do is break it down into each sentence. Well, again, I can do that with string_split. So let's run this and we can see that we've got these 6 different rows. Now also notice that it's only this first one that actually starts right at the beginning. All the others don't. And that's because we don't just have a dot separating these sentences, we also have a space. We didn't have that in the first example. So we have a space or 2 right at the beginning. So what we need to do is to use the trim function around that. So this is my results again. And if I run this, then you can see the answers. Now, if you're using SQL Server 2016, then you won't be able to use the trim function as that came in 2017. The trim just gets rid of spaces right at the beginning or right at the end. So if you're using 2016, then you'll need to use an L trim. And if you want to, an R trim as well to get rid of spaces at the beginning and at the end. Now you also notice that we have got a blank at the end of the results. So I was thinking we'd have a space there, but in fact we don't, it's just added it. So we don't obviously want a space, an emptiness at the end. So I can also say where, and I'll copy this. This is the trim or the L trim, R trim is not equal to blank. Notice it's not a null, it's just a blank. So you can use this string split in a select statement using wheres and group bys and everything else as well. It's just that the string_split occurs in the from as a data source. Also note that what we are using to separate them gets consumed. So there is no dot at the end of any of these. So you might just want to add a dot to the end to make it a true sentence. Now I should say this dot, well, you could have acronyms. So suppose I had an extremely durable bike from the British Broadcasting Corporation, so BBC. So let's just add BBC into it and you can see that's fine, there's no dots. But if I start going B dot, C dot, which it can also be referred to, then it's going to break at every single dot. So you should be careful. If you are using a particular piece of punctuation for more than just one purpose, then unfortunately string split will split it each time. So you might just want to be aware of that. Now you might think, okay, what I can do to get around that is look for a dot and a space. Unfortunately, string split will only allow one character. So this could be an Unicode character or a non-Unicode character, an ASCII character, for instance, but it will only be the one. So you can see parameter is of a type of nchar1, nvarchar1. So it's got to be just the one. So now let's take another example. I'm going to copy this into another query window, and this is a query window of AdventureWorks 2014. So let me copy this results clause as well, and we just execute it and get exactly the same result. And the answer is no, invalid object name string split. So what's going on? Why did it work perfectly well here, but not in this query window? And the reason is this is taken from AdventureWorks 2014, and you need at least 2016 compatibility. You might also see that as compatibility level 130. So does that mean I cannot use string split with this database? Well, as it stands, that's correct. But if I right and click on it and go down to properties, and then in the database properties, go to the fourth tab, options, you can see at the top, we have got compatibility level. And the default is, because it's AdventureWorks 2014, that it uses compatibility level 120 for SQL Server 2014. So if I change it to SQL Server 2016, just click OK, and then run it again, then it does indeed work. Now, how can it work with tables? So here we have got a table, the product description, and you can see that it's got all of these multi-sentence descriptions, and it's also got a product ID right at the beginning. How can we split all of those? Well, you remember where this needs to be. This needs to be in the from clause. So I can't just say string split description in the select clause. That simply does not work. Instead, we need to have some sort of connection between this table and this function. Now, the connection between a table and a table is called a join. A connection between a table and a function is called an apply. And more specifically, I'm going to use a cross apply. A cross apply is the equivalent of an inner join, whereas an outer apply is the equivalent of a left join. So the only time you will need applies is when you are using a function. So string split being a good example. So let's have a look at what happens when we cross apply it. Now we have the initial columns, and additionally we have value. So if I get just the product ID, if I get the description, and if I just get value, so I'm getting rid of other things, you can see that we have got this row split into 4 different rows. So the text reads suitable for any type of riding on or off-road, dot. So that's the first row. Fits any budget, that's the second row, and smooth shifting all the way down to ride is the third row. And then we get this annoying 4th row. So again, we might want to say where value is not equal to blank. And that removes that. And again, we'll want to have the trim. So this could be straightforward trim or an L trim, R trim, as we've seen previously. And there we have our finished query. So we might just want to get rid of a description, and there we have the individual sentences. Now, there's one more thing to talk about string split, and that's if you're using a Azure version. So this is all the on-premises. So this is the one that you would install on your own server. But if you go to another type of database, the Azure, and run exactly the same thing. So I will just copy that exact query, and I just need to change the name because it's in a different schema. If I run this, then you can see we get exactly the same result. So no difference. So why am I talking to you about Azure? Because there is a third argument that you can use. So if I change this back to star and see how many columns we got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all we're getting from string split is just one column. Now what I can do is add comma 1. So I can only do this on Azure. So if I run that, then we have 1, 2, 3 columns, 4, 5, 6. And this additional column is called the Ordinal. So if I get this back and add in a new column, the Ordinal, what this shows is it the first split, the second split, or the third split? So because I'm using Azure, it allows me to get some additional information. Now that's why there are all of these squiggly underlines. The computer is expecting me to put in a third parameter. Indeed, if I go over string split, you can see an insufficient number of arguments were supplied. And if I put the open bracket, you can see it's expecting 3 arguments. So then if I put in my comma 1, then the red squiggly underline disappears. And if I run this, then it says it's got too many arguments specified. So I can't win. Either I've got the squiggly underline, which is what I actually do need if it's on premises, or I just can't run the code. But in Azure, you can say comma 1 to get this ordinal, or you can say, no, I don't want this ordinal. And you can see if you put comma 0, it isn't included. Now you don't need to just do this in SSMS. For instance, if you're using the Azure version, here I am in the query editor, and if I paste in my query and run, there we can see the answer, including the ordinal and the value column. So this is how you can use string split. You put it into the from clause, and if you want it to work with a table or query, then you can cross apply it. So the syntax, fairly simple. You put in what you want to split and what single character you want to split it with. And if you're using Microsoft Azure, then you can put in comma 1 if you want an additional column, which is the ordinal column. Thank you for joining me in this video. If you like it, then please click the like button. And why not subscribe and click the bell next to it so you'll be notified of any new videos. Thank you for watching this and keep learning.